All right, welcome to Political Review with Frank Calabrese and myself, Ray Hanania. It's Tuesday, August 10th, 2026.
All right.
Frank is a political consultant and analyst at frankcalabrese.com. And I'm a former Chicago City Hall reporter and columnist at Hanania.com. This video podcast on political politics focuses on specific political developments, issues, and controversies in Chicago and the Chicagoland area. We focus in on it and we broadcast when those issues arise. We tape, we talk, and we share our insight with you. Our website is political-review.com. It's on YouTube. Check us out and subscribe. This episode looks at the $1.9 billion shortfall that the Chicago Public Schools need, according to major media and observers, driven by massive pension obligations. Chicago and the state will pump $1 billion into that pension debt, with the state injecting some $368 million into the pensions this year, with Chicago covering the rest. The Chicago Teachers Union passed an unbalanced budget and they want the state to inject $150 million more to prevent city school teacher administration layoffs. But the CPS, the Chicago Public Schools, has proposed a $9.9 billion budget with 1,600 layoffs proposed. I don't know. The schools are a mess. I went to the public schools in Chicago and I'm glad I'm out of it. It didn't help me. The military helped me.
Oh, that's
Frank,
good.
what's going on with school spending? Has anything really changed other than the cost rising faster than student grades in Chicago?
You're right. So CPS has a lot of problems. As you mentioned, they passed the budget about I think 2 weeks ago, and there's a divide on the board. You have the CPS, you have the CTU members that
Right.
were appointed by the mayor largely, and then you have the elected members who aren't with CTU. And the elected members voted against this budget. This budget was not proposed by the CEO of CPS. This was proposed by the members,
Right.
and it's fairly irresponsible because it
So which
relies
side
on
side proposed it? The union side or the non-union side?
the
The
union side
union side,
proposed it.
right? Yeah.
CPS, as you mentioned, they had their own proposal, which laid off some people.
Hmm.
But CTU's like, no, we don't want any layoffs. We just want more money.
So there are people
Um,
that are going to be laid off.
Right, but they were relying on the idea that the state would come in during the veto session in the
Right.
fall and somehow give them more money. But like that's just not how it works. Number one, if the state came in during veto session, it wouldn't be money for this year. It'd be money for the next year. Um, and another thing is, it's just politically, that's just very hard to do.
Right.
Chicago's about 20% of the state.
Right.
In Chicago, public schools have a well-documented history of just not great financial management.
Right.
So to ask the state to bail out CPS without having any reform or responsibility in terms of, reducing jobs and reducing the budget, I just think wouldn't pass in Springfield.
Frank, when were you born? When were you born? Because
I'm very old. I was born in 1991, so I'm
okay, in
very old man.
1984, in
Right.
1984, they did the exact same thing. They were throwing money at the schools from the state to bail out the city schools. I got in a fight with Mike Royko. He attacked me because I wrote a column saying, "Why are the suburbanites in the collar counties being asked to bail out the city schools?" This was in 1984. We were
Right.
doing it. And he said, "I need to go get a brain." I said, "Okay, anytime you want to attack me, that makes me feel good." Okay, because I'd rather have you attack me than a nobody. Nobody will pay attention to me. But
Right.
this goes back. We're talking, 50 years. This problem, it has never been solved, and it comes down to I think it's a little aggravated more now because the unions not only are pushing for increases, they not only endorse candidates, they are candidates, right?
Right.
Doesn't it? And isn't that what we're seeing on this board now?
Yeah, so the union, like the Chicago Teachers Union, they've become like a political party.
Right.
And they
And they have to
ran
negotiate though, right, for their wages
right. And
with
and so
themselves if they control the government.
So they control majority of the board.
Right.
Um, and again, like, there's this huge budget deficit, and the student population over the last 8 years is down like 13%. It's down 45,000 students.
Right.
And at the same time, it's down 45,000 students. There's 10,000 more employees. So just, the budget, there's been no responsibility in
Did,
terms of this budget. They're
have you
just
ever heard
hiring.
of a union that didn't want to hire anybody? Right.
Right. So,
You
but,
see
but
where
be,
do you think that's a problem? I mean, it's tough because I am a pro-union person.
Mhm.
And we've talked about this the last time. There's no checks and balances when a union elects union candidates and the majority of the public school board is union. When
Right,
it comes time to negotiate, of course, yeah, we lost how many students, but we want to hire more administrators. Administrators are a huge part of the cost. I mean, I was doing some research. Cook County, out of $100 that's sent to Springfield in taxes, $98 goes back to Cook County for schools.
right,
And actually for everything, $98 goes back. The bulk of that, though, is leaning towards Chicago, not the suburban Cook County.
mhm,
Now, in the collar counties, only $60 goes back to them of their money. That's $40 out of every 100 goes to Chicago. And downstate, they're a complete disaster and they get so much more money. A lot of that money, they're as bad as the Chicago public schools
right.
downstate. And I think they do that to balance off the Democrat and to keep the Republicans happy. The Democrats say, okay, we'll give you money for your schools and your expenses and your needs and stuff. There's a big problem with the way we fund schools, don't you think?
Well, right now, Illinois is somewhat unique in the fact that we rely overwhelmingly on property taxes.
Right,
And that means that where you live has a huge determination on the quality of education you get, right? So if you lived in Rich Township versus New Trier Township, you would have a totally different type of educational experience. And like the average SAT score in New Trier is like 1,300, and Rich it's like 700.
right.
Um, it's just it's based on where you live. Now, other states, the funding is much more state level and redistributed through the state, where in Illinois, it's property tax based.
But New Trier in these there are like 10 areas that are just phenomenally
Mhm.
rich and wealthy and their schools do much better than the rest of the area. They don't get as much money though as these other areas because those are out in the suburbs. When you talk about Chicago, Chicago is the drain. I mean, in my opinion, it's mismanaged. We've seen this for 5
Yeah,
decades.
CPS is a huge budget.
Yes, because it's
Um,
bigger than any of the
right.
suburbs. Yeah.
They have 45,000 employees,
How many
which
are
is a lot.
teachers, do we know?
I have to look that up, but the current student body is about 315,000 and 46,000
Right.
employees.
But back when I was going to school in Chicago, it was 500,000 students,
Yeah, it's
and it
down
was
a lot.
far less money. And the Illinois State Board of Education didn't have to reduce the proficiency level. They brought it down. It's like taking an F from a 65 and bringing it down to a 55 score. Well, all those people who were flunking with 55% grades are now passing. That's an artificial manipulation to make it look better.
Mhm.
Our schools are, I mean, did you go to the public schools?
No,
We're,
I went to school in Wisconsin,
you're
so.
lucky. You're lucky because they're a mess here and they've been a mess. And the only answer seems to be throw more money, hire more administrators, and this new factor, put them under the control of the unions. I think it's wrong. And again, not that I don't like the unions, but you got to have checks and balances.
It's a huge part of like expenses. So if you when you get your tax bill in
Oh, yeah,
Chicago,
60 to
40
70%.
Yeah, it's
It's high.
45%. It's by far the largest expense
Well,
goes
in
to public
Chicago,
schools.
it's 45% because
Right.
the state's bailing out the city. In the
Right. In the
suburbs where
suburbs, it's
I'm
more
at,
like
and right,
60%,
yes, it
right?
is. It's higher. It's like, we're paying more. There's something wrong with that system. And when you question it, it's like you get attacked. There's a huge army of defenders for the school system, and they don't like people talking about it or engaging in a discussion. You're probably going to get lobbied, Frank. They've given up on me a long time ago.
They did.
I graduated with a D plus average in the city schools.
Really?
So, oh yeah, I was
Which
really
high
happy.
school?
I went to Bowen High School for 2 years. White Flight sent me to Bogan. When I got to Bogan, the teachers, I was only there 2 weeks. They just bought a house. And they said, "You're black. You don't belong here." I go, "What? I just left White Flight with White Flight." They go, "Well, you were a mistake." So I ended up going to Little Flower, and then we moved again. We had to sell a house that we just bought, and I ended up graduating from Revis High School in the suburbs. And my education in the suburbs was far better than the education I got in the city.
Yeah, like, I mean, the rap on Chicago Public Schools, it's more like a jobs program than really focused on
Yes.
the students.
So what do we do? What do you I mean when you look at this, what do you think needs to be done? What do we do?
Well, I mean, first we just have to like, there's too many schools and too few students,
Right.
right? So in the last 8 years, there's been an exodus of, the student population's gone down 45,000. I don't know if you read this, but there are schools that are built for 1,000 students
Right.
that have like 40, 50 students, and that's not an exaggeration.
Right. I think I
Um,
remember,
and
I don't remember who told me, but somebody said that there were 160 school buildings. And maybe it was you or somebody that said that they could be reused for, they should be closed and they should be reused, that they don't have enough students in them or that they're empty.
it's a huge operating cost, so there has to be some consolidation. Um, and also, like, we think, oh, don't close schools, you have to be bused further, but like, what type of education experience are you getting if your entire high school is 50 people?
Right.
You know what I mean? Like, you're not getting,
And
um,
200 administrators. That's the
right,
issue, isn't it? You close 160 schools, how much patronage loses work?
right.
And, I've,
So back in the day, we spoke about, patronage was understood as like streets and sanitation
right,
jobs, right?
right.
But now, I mean, you could say, you can look at the
Anybody,
schools,
right,
all these nonprofits. I don't know if you've been reading about this, but there's all these anti-violence nonprofits and all these community groups that are being paid by, the mayor's office or by the Chicago Public Schools, and like this has kind of become the new patronage program. So instead of working on a garbage truck, you work for a nonprofit
right.
and you get a grant.
Well, I mean, isn't that part of the problem with these schools that are nearly empty?
Mhm.
They got too many jobs there. You
Right.
close the school, you lose the job, or you have a hard time placing these union jobs someplace else. Now, I feel bad. I don't want to see anybody lose a job. I mean, it's not a
Right.
good thing. I went through it once. I hated it. It was not fun.
Mhm.
But there's got to be something else that we could do, right?
Right.
And
Yeah,
isn't it hard to talk about that issue? People don't want to talk about
it
that issue.
was so, Rahm Emanuel famously closed 50 schools in 2015. And then it just became, yeah, again, it's a topic you couldn't talk about because,
Right.
people said, oh, this is so bad. Now, Rahm made the assumption that if you just close them all at once, it'd be better than just doing a
Yes,
gradual closing.
that's
And
smart.
what happened was it was just such a dramatic gesture closing 50 schools at once that it became like this rallying call for the Chicago Teachers Union.
Right, because
Um,
they lost a lot of jobs and had to
mhm,
find new positions for them. It was if you did it one at a time, you'd be losing a trickle of jobs every time a school closed comparatively.
right.
But
But yeah, I'm looking, I'm on the CPS website and there are, Bowen High School where you went
yep,
has about 350 students.
that's
And
amazing. Wow.
but there are high schools like Douglas, Hirsch that have 35 and 90 students.
Wow.
Fenger has 170, in Roseland. Manly has 150. Harlem has, 157. And that's not the senior class. That's the entire high school.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think my graduating class was something like 200. Just my
Right.
senior class. We're celebrating our 55th Bowen reunion, I think, in September. Now, most of us have died, unfortunately. So,
You're
so they're
not
not.
that old, Ray. You're
Oh,
not
I'm
that
getting
old.
up there. I'm getting up there. I may not look it, but I am up there. But it does come back. I think the problem with the schools, as you point out, is we're tied to the property tax, number one, and people who don't have kids anymore in the system get really upset about it,
Right.
and they have to try and keep them happy. And it also has to do with the jobs and the costs and the administrators that have to be paid in a bloated system. I mean, it's just amazing how that budget has increased so dramatically over the
It's
years.
it's like $10 billion. It's huge.
It is huge. It
Right.
really is. Do you know what the city budget is? How it compares with the city of Chicago?
I think, the city budget's a little, I want to say the city budget's around the same. Might be a little higher. I think the city budget's around 11
Yeah, I'd
million.
have to look that up. I
Right.
think when we broke a billion, that was a big news story. I think that was back in the 80s.
Mhm. That's a long time
So,
ago.
so what happens? How does this impact for example, the mayoral election? Because
Well, so right, as you know, after years and years of CTU pushing for this, now the school board is going to be fully independent of the mayor come November.
somewhat,
And I think this is not going to work out well for the teachers union because they weren't able to find enough candidates to run. And it's highly unlikely they're going to have a majority now. It looks like that the people opposed to the teachers union are going to have a majority on the board.
wow,
So the mayor's office is not going to have formal control over the Chicago Public Schools, but they've had historically this control. So I think they're still going to be very influential,
right?
schools.
Yeah, I'm
Yeah,
sure they
and
will
I
be.
just got the numbers. So
Okay.
City of Chicago, 17 billion. That's a lot.
Yeah, it is. I mean, it's grown
I mean,
dramatically. That
and
that
then
is,
Chicago Public Schools is at 10 billion.
and again, money goes to a certain percentage of administrators that really make a lot of money, and our system is reluctant to block it. And the pensions. I remember one politician talking to me one time years ago, and I didn't never understood it. His goal was to double his pension. And I'm thinking,
That was his goal. That was his life goal.
that was because it was like he's working in one job, he got a pension, and then he went into another one, and he wanted to make sure that because at one job there was a pension level, and now at the second job it was like, yeah, I'm this is what you need to do. And me, I never thought about a pension. I'm an independent. Yeah, I get a little pension from the Sun Times. I know they're so unhappy about having to pay me after I got in a fight with them back in '92. But that was a big driving factor when you were in politics. Politics and pensions. You win the politics, you win the pension, and that was the goal for a lot of politicians. And they downplayed it. They didn't talk about it because it started becoming a bigger story.
Right.
So, but now we have these candidates that are running for mayor. This is probably one of the biggest problems that they're going to have to address. What do they do with the schools, right?
Right. And like they're not going to have formal power, but they're going to be influential. And there's this question about school consolidation because there's this moratorium that was put together under Lori Lightfoot. And as you know, like Brandon Johnson's not going to be closing any schools. So
Right.
we haven't closed any schools. I mean, I want to say since
Well,
2015,
why? Why do you think? I mean, I
um,
think I have a theory on it, but why do
or
you think they didn't close schools? Because they lose
it's
votes,
it's
right?
all politics, right? I mean,
Yeah, they're going to
if
lose
that's your
votes.
theory, it's just right. It's just all politics. It's a bad headline. But again, like, I'm looking at some of these high schools. Douglas
That's amazing.
High School, Douglas Academy, 35 students.
That's amazing. How many
First
teachers they got there?
Metropolitan,
I bet they got
90
more
students.
I bet they got more teachers at those schools than they do students.
I mean, I don't know if you can operate a big building with less than 30 people. I mean, just in terms of janitorial
Well, you got
staff. But,
maintenance, and you're going to have
right.
administrators, and then you're going to have teachers. Wow, it'd be great if I were in a class with 5 people. I would have learned something, but I was in a class with 40, 45 kids. I was shoved off into the corner, the dunce corner, because the teachers didn't have the resources to spend on the kids that didn't show, the brain width.
Right.
They really focused on the kids that had the talent and wanted to build them up.
And you were one of those kids, or?
I was one of the kids that was like terrible. I flunked English composition all my life until the military knocked me in the head and woke me up during the Vietnam War. But up until then, I never passed English composition. I flunked it. And people, when I became a journalist, people look at me and they said, "How is that possible? You could have been a doctor. You don't need to spell. You could have made a lot more money." But so we have. I think the mayoral candidates are going to try to avoid this and or use it against Brandon Johnson, right? If he runs, because he's the union candidate, the
Right.
CTA
I mean,
candidate.
the rap on Brandon Johnson is just like he's just generally incompetent, right? He's just not managing things and he doesn't know what he's doing. And
Right,
so when you look at Chicago Public Schools, it's a very similar argument, right? It's just
right.
not being ran very well. So it's just kind of like another example of the Johnson administration just not practicing good governance.
Yeah, I don't know. I did a little analysis of all the schools, and they have like this. The deficit keeps growing. They keep throwing money at the budget. They dip into things like the TIF surplus. The TIF
Right.
surplus is supposed to support businesses. It's not supposed to be a piggy bank where you can just where and that in Chicago it's basically a piggy bank, a slush fund where they can grab money. So the TIF never really achieves what it was supposed to achieve, and that's a problem. And then you have the I don't know. It's no one is addressing the problem. If you suggest that the suburbs shouldn't be the bailout, in terms of taxes, you get attacked. Like you don't care
Right.
about the inner city. But do you think the whole city of Chicago is poor? They got some. If I wanted to buy a house in Chicago, the Chicago house, that's the equivalent of my suburban house, would cost 3 times more. The home values there are three
Oh,
times
wow.
more. If you want a similar house, I
Mhm.
can't afford a house in Chicago. If I wanted to get into a neighborhood that was kind of equivalent to, and we have much diversity out in Orland
Right.
Park, but they kind of turn it upside down a little bit to make the argument that no, 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 they need the money from the state. The state should bail us out, and you can bet your bottom dollar that the state will eventually pass the money to give to the schools, depending on how it impacts the election, the mayoral election in February. They're going to drag this out, I think, to hurt Brandon Johnson. I think he's hurting himself with
You're
the
right.
union. But I think the politicians, they may want somebody else. Maybe they want Janulius, whoever they want. They're going to drag this out and use this to kind of bring those, that, raise some candidates and
Yeah,
bring
so I
some
mean,
down.
we should talk about this. Like Chicago Public Schools, they're going to be running out of money, right? And so, I mean, before
They've
the mayor's
always,
election, but I mean, like literally because they passed the unbalanced budget by,
right.
hundreds of millions of dollars, and this is going to become a campaign issue because they're going to have to pass a new budget, or they're going to have to lay off, 2,000 people or close the schools. So, I mean, this is going to
Say,
become a campaign issue because the budget's so unbalanced.
but Stacey Davis Gates is probably going to take a different argument than some of the non-union activists out there that are running, right? I
Right.
mean, she's going to want money. She wants government money to
Mhm.
bail out the schools. There's no doubt about it.
Right. You're not getting federal money, under
Right.
this Trump
No.
administration.
Yes,
So,
not at
and
all.
again, like state money, like like you're saying, you're asking the suburbs to bail out the Chicago public school system, and I'm not too sure that's a popular idea.
No, we get thrown under the school bus all the time. The suburbs. Nobody cares about us. And when you go into the suburbs, our voter turnout is far less than the city. It should be
Mhm.
higher, but they just, I don't know, they feel happy with what they got, and that's a terrible reason to be happy. We're better off than we could have been. That's not a good reason to be it. What else? Anything else going on with the schools that we should be watching? Any trends? Any other trends at all?
Well, like I said, like they passed the budget, and when they passed the budget, the Chicago Teachers Union Line members said, "Oh, the state promised that they would bail us out." And then Marianne Ahern, she interviewed Chris Welsh, and Chris Welsh said, "Well, I didn't promise anything. I didn't,
Yeah.
they didn't tell me about 150 million." So, they passed this budget with the hope that the state would bail them out, but doesn't look like the state's going to do anything.
Do you think it's because the mayor is part of the CTU and the union? Is that a major factor in terms of many
Well, I
politicians not wanting to do this? Because they usually all will bail out the schools.
right. So this has been a historically weak mayor. You know what I mean? So we thought Lori
Yes,
Lightfoot was weak, but
you're right.
Brandon Johnson just doesn't have friends in Springfield. It's just
Yeah,
simple as that.
yeah. All right.
So, I mean, obviously someone like Richard Daley around Manuel, maybe they could use their, personal skills or political skills to kind of get some extra money out of Springfield, but you're not going to get that from Brandon Johnson.
All right. Well, we'll be waiting to see the veto session, right?
Right.
If something happens there.
Yeah, and Vita session is going to be interesting because also that they're talking about the Bear Stadium. Something might happen with
That was a big success. They've been it's hard to tell whether there's going to be a Bear Stadium or whether there's not going to. It's kind of like the Iran war. Is there a war? Is there no war? Is there going to be a Bear
Yeah,
Stadium?
yeah,
Is there no? Is there going to be a bailout of the school system? I can say definitely there will be.
right.
I'm almost certain.
It's just a question of how much, right?
Yes, and they'll
But and
want some
also like if you have to
controls.
bail out the Chicago public schools, the suburbs downstate, they're going to ask for more money.
Yeah, and
It's
like
going
I
to be
said, I mean the balance is suburban areas for every $100 they outside the six county area, downstate, they get $178 back for every
mhm,
$100 they put into the state. And that
right.
really, I think, needs to change.
Hmm.
So I don't know. All right, Frank. Listen, it's always good talking to you. We'll see
Thanks
you
so
in
much
our.
for having me, Ray. This
That's
is
all right.
great.
Well, for having me, we're co-hosts. Okay, don't blame me for everything. And everybody, we appreciate you listening. Just watch for our next program, next big topic. Like I said, we hone in on topics. We try to focus on it, and then we just end it. Whatever comes up, something big tomorrow or later in the week. Frank, you have a great day, and we'll talk later.
Thanks, Ray.
All right.